This video will look at challenges and risks involved in international trade. Doing business involves risk, and more so when you are doing international business and trade. Traders should understand what are the risks involved and mitigate them. Please watch a very interesting video of Rihua Everfresh, a banana importer that is doing brisk business in China. You will find that a carrier by the name of Maersk Line is one of the intermediaries or transport carriers that assist the importer in shipping the goods from Ecuador to Dalian, China. Hope you have taken some time to watch the video. If you are the seller, you will wonder if the buyer will pay, and if you are the buyer, whether the seller will ship the goods specified. Now, what about customs regulations? These are like passports that may restrict the import and export of goods. How about tax laws? Taxes may increase the price of your imports. What about trade restrictions and quotas that may limit the quantity of the goods that you can either export or import? FTA is Free Trade Agreement. It refers to legally binding agreements between two or more countries to enhance economic cooperation. Now, traders in partner countries will enjoy lower costs because customs duties and taxes are either waived or removed. Traders should refer to the Ministry of Trade and Industry or Enterprise Singapore to find out more about the FTAs that are in existence right now. The Ecuadorian exporter and the Chinese importer may have some cultural or language barriers. How about shipping? How will they ship the goods by air, by sea, and in what form? By LCL or FCL, or even in break bulk form? What about the mode and currency of payment? Other than that, what about insurance? Whose duty or responsibility will it be? After all, bananas are pretty fragile. What about the warehousing or storage of the goods? And how to pack and label the goods? What are some of the requirements? And the pricing of the goods in each, either to the seller or to the buyer. What about the competition? So these challenges can sometimes be expressed as risks in international trade. We may categorize the risk as follows: buyer's insolvency or credit risk, buyer's acceptance risk, knowledge inadequacy risk, seller's performance risk, documentation risk, economic risk, cultural risk, legal risk, foreign exchange risk, political or sovereign risk, shipping and transit risk, as well as cybersecurity risk. Let's take a look at each of these in the following. The buyer's insolvency or credit risk refers to the inability of the buyer to honor the full payment for goods or services on the due date. To mitigate this, the seller can transact on secure instruments such as LC or ask for advance payment and buy export credit insurance, which protects against buyer's default. The seller may also perform credit checks on the buyers and trade with reputable parties. Buyer's acceptance risk refers to buyer's non-acceptance of goods delivered or services rendered. This may create difficulty to dispose the goods to another buyer or encounter working capital problem if the buyer does not want to accept the goods. The solutions are similar to the buyer's insolvency or credit risk. Also ensure the use of legally enforceable contracts. Knowledge inadequacy risk refers to the insufficiency of knowledge of the market or industry situation overseas that may cause or increase business failure. So to mitigate this, sellers should conduct market research and screening or seek advice or consultant's help. Seller's performance risk refers to the seller's failure to carry out his obligation in a sales contract for some reasons, which may affect the buyer's business. It could be expensive, of course, for buyer to take legal actions against seller in the seller's country. To mitigate this, the buyer can trade with reputable parties, insist on pre-shipment inspection, where an inspection certificate will be provided by an independent inspection companies. Use well-drafted contracts with general terms and conditions, such as the contract of the International Sales of Goods by ICC or International Chamber of Commerce, with penalty clause for non-performance. A good contract should also include choice of law, the forum, and where to arbitrate or settle disputes.
if necessary. Documentation risk refers to the risk of non-conformance to specific documentation requirements under a sales contract or under a letter of credit. This may lead to sellers' inability or delay in obtaining payments for goods already delivered or service rendered. The solution is that seller must check the requirements stipulated in the contract or LC thoroughly. If he is unable to fulfill them, he will need to get the buyer to amend or revise where possible. Of course, seeking advice from experts like trade embassies or consultants to ensure documentation like licenses and custom requirements are complied with will be helpful. Economic risk refers to unfavorable economic condition in buyer or seller's country, which may affect both parties in fulfilling their obligations. On the buyer side, economic risk may result in the buyer's insolvency or inability to accept the goods. On the other hand, a seller may also experience difficulty in producing or shipping the goods because of economic risk. The solution is to prepare a contingency plan, not that it will reduce the risk, but to weigh the options available. So traders do need to exercise due diligence to reduce economic and market risk. Cultural risk refers to difficulties in appreciating or accepting the cultural and language differences or barriers that may result in conflicts and non-completion of the sales contract. Solution is do research and understand the cultural characteristics of your foreign counterparties. Get documents or contracts translated where necessary to avoid misunderstanding. Legal risk refers to the potential for financial loss arising from uncertainty of legal proceeding or change in legislations, such as foreign exchange control policy. This could lead to frustration of contracts. The solution is to check on regulations, engage expert advice, at least get minimal legal protection, or refuse the deal. Of course, specific Incoterms should also apply in the contract. We will learn about Incoterms in a later topic. Foreign exchange risk refers to fluctuations in foreign currencies in the daily course of business. This may result in the buyer paying more or the seller receiving less in terms of the local currency. To mitigate this, trade in local currency wherever possible. Otherwise, protect against the exchange rate fluctuations by using foreign exchange forward or option contracts, which is called the hedge contracts. This is outside the scope of this module, but you may want to get your finance person to handle this. Political or sovereign risk refers to complications that buyer or seller may expose due to unfavorable political decisions or political changes. For examples are changes in the fiscal or monetary policy, wars, riots, terrorism, and trade embargoes, etc. To mitigate this, conduct due diligence on the country risk factors. Avoid trading with warring or hostile countries and buy additional insurance that protect against wars, social upheaval, and SRCC, meaning strikes, riots, and civil commotions. Shipping and transit risk refers to the risk of goods being damaged during shipment from the place of origin to the place of destination. Failure in addressing such risk may result in heavy replacement costs. To mitigate this, use reliable carriers and freight forwarders. Buy insurance coverage against all likely contingencies. If the shipping freight rate is too good to be true, it probably is and should be avoided. Cybersecurity risk refers to vulnerabilities that arise because of massive migration to digitization in recent years. There is a need for cybersecurity standards and remedies to reduce exposure of cyber attacks when firms trade internationally. Firms may use strong cybersecurity measures like firewall, strong passwords, two-factor authentication, or encryption of data, and cybersecurity policies to guide staff. This is an example of political or sovereign risk in the form of trade embargoes, which makes it illegal for Singapore companies to supply luxurious items to North Korea. This is an example of shipping or transit risk, which arises from various collisions or bad weather or heavy seas or accidents or even very poor packing, which may render the goods or even container loads unusable because of damage incurred. This is another example of MSC Zoe, which lost up to 270 containers in rough weather in the North Sea
in 2019. Dozens of containers with items including flat-screen TV sets have washed up on Dutch islands in the North Sea after the ship lost part of its cargo, bringing a windfall to local treasure hunters. MSC also confirmed a successful pirate attack on the sub-Panamax container ship MSC Mandy off the coast of Cotonou, Benin in 2019. The ship was underway in the Gulf of Guinea when she was attacked and boarded at a position about 55 nautical miles offshore. 6 crew members were reported missing.
The traditional 3 Lakes cooling water marketed by Wenking Group has been adapted to suit different cultures and markets, as you can see from the example here. You may recall the term black swan risk, which refer to unpredictable events that are beyond what are normally expected of a situation with potentially severe consequences. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in severe disruption in supply chain and affected international trade. Goods are sometimes stuck at the port, or they are not able to be manufactured due to shortages of labor, manpower, etc. To recap, we have looked at different types of risks involved in international trade and different ways to mitigate these risks. We have come to the end of this video. The next video will focus on the modes of entry with a focus on exporting strategies as a business model.